All right, let's look into one of the biggest books of the last decade, Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens. We're going to unpack some of its key ideas and try to answer a massive question. How did we, Homo sapiens, go from basically just another ape to, well, running the entire planet? I mean, really think about it. For most of human history, we were pretty unremarkable. Seriously, we were these middle-of-the-food chain animals, more worried about being eaten than eating. We were definitely not the kings of the jungle. So how did we end up in charge of everything? What changed? What was our secret? So first things first, we have to remember where we came from. We're animals, part of the great ape family, to be exact. Our closest living cousins? Chimpanzees. In fact, the book points out this amazing idea. Just 6 million years ago, there was this one female ape who had 2 daughters. One of them went on to become the ancestor of all chimpanzees. And the other one? Well, she became the great, you get the idea, grandmother of every single one of us. So for millions of years, we were just kind of there. But then, somewhere around 70,000 years ago, something clicked. Something changed inside our brains. It was like a switch flipped. Harari calls this the cognitive revolution. And honestly, it might have just been some random genetic mutation, a total accident. But it turned out to be the accident that would change the world forever. So this cognitive revolution, it gave us a superpower. And no, it's not what you're probably thinking. It's not our big brains or the fact we can use tools. It's something way weirder, something that doesn't even physically exist. To get what I mean, let's talk about something we all know. A big company. Okay, let's take Peugeot, the car company. It's real, right? I mean, it's got buildings, huge factories with machines whirring, it has people showing up for work every day, managers sitting in offices, and obviously it has actual physical cars that you can go out and buy. All of that stuff is real. You can kick the tires. But here's the tricky part. Where is Peugeot? I mean, can you point to it? It's not the factory itself. It's not the CEO. If all the factories burned down and all the employees quit, Peugeot could just rebuild and hire new people. And get this. If a judge signs a piece of paper that says the company is dissolved, boof, it's gone, even though all the cars and buildings are still sitting right there. So what is it? And this is the big reveal, the mind-blowing idea from Sapiens. Peugeot, the company, isn't a physical object at all. Harari calls it a figment of our collective imagination. That's it. It's just a story. A very powerful story that we all just agree to believe is real. Now, there's a fancy term for this. It's called a legal fiction. And it's this crazy idea where we pretend a company is a person. I'm not kidding. The law treats it like a person. It can own things, it can sue people, it can be sued, all without having a body or a brain or a heart. It's kind of a brilliant trick when you think about it. So how do you conjure one of these things into existence? It really is like a magic trick. You get a lawyer, who Harari cheekily calls a sorcerer, to write down some special words, the right legal spells on a piece of paper. They follow the ancient rulebook, the legal code, and boom, hocus cocus, a company is born, just because we all say it is. And that, right there, is our superpower. That's the secret sauce of Homo sapiens. We can invent stories, fictions, shared myths, whatever you want to call them, and then act like they're totally real. This is why we can cooperate in massive numbers. A chimp can't get thousands of other chimps he's never met to build a rocket ship, but we can. This is how we build everything: cities, religions, entire countries. And that brings us to this really key concept of an imagined order. These are the powerful, shared stories about gods, about nations, about laws, money, and corporations that form the invisible architecture of our societies. Ancient civilizations didn't have corporate law, of course, but they built their own imagined orders that were just as powerful, all to manage their growing numbers. So let's move on to the first great tool for building these orders on a massive scale: writing. But where it came from might surprise you. It wasn't invented to write epic poems or passionate love letters. Not even close. Yep, the first writing systems, like Sumerian cuneiform, were basically just bureaucratic tools. They were created to track debts, record harvests, and, you guessed it, calculate taxes. This was the boring administrative backbone that you absolutely need to manage a large, complex society. It actually changed how humans think, forcing us to organize information almost like a filing cabinet in our brains. And it's not just about corporations, not by a long shot. Take a look at these 2 documents. They're separated by 3,500 years, but they are essentially doing the same job. They're both cooperation manuals for millions of people, based entirely on powerful stories, or what Harari calls imagined orders. First, you've got the Code of Hammurabi from ancient Babylon. It told a story that society was divided into a strict hierarchy: superiors, commoners, and slaves. And everyone just accepted it. So if a superior blinded another superior, the punishment was an eye for an eye. But if a superior blinded a commoner, well, he just had to pay a fine of 60 shekels of silver. See? That's not biology, that's a story. But for them, it was reality. Okay, now let's fast forward a few thousand years to a story that's probably a bit more familiar to a lot of us. The U.S. Declaration of Independence. It tells a completely different story, right? It says that all men are created equal. Now, is that a scientific fact? Like, can you prove it in a biology lab? Nope. It's a story, just like Hammurabi's story about hierarchy. But it's an incredibly powerful story that has organized hundreds of millions of people for centuries. Both are imagined realities we just agree to believe is real. This is a fantastic way to see the difference between objective reality and imagined reality. Look at the left side, female. That's biology. XX chromosomes, a uterus. That stuff doesn't change, whether you're in ancient Greece or modern Greece. But look at the right, woman. That's the story we tell. In ancient Athens, the story said a woman couldn't own property or vote. Today, in Athens, the story is completely different. The biology is identical. The story, it's changed everything. So what's the result of all this shared belief? Well, when you get millions of people believing in the same gods, the same pharaohs, the same vision of the afterlife, you get this. You get the pyramids. You get entire civilizations pouring all their energy into building something for a story. And you know what? We haven't stopped. We're still building pyramids. They just look a little different now. For a lot of us, our modern pyramid might be that suburban house with the white picket fence and the perfect green lawn. Or maybe it's that corner office or that fancy penthouse apartment. We chase these things because our culture, our shared story, tells us that this is what success looks like. So while law created order within societies, the next imagined order we're going to talk about was so powerful it could create cooperation between them, even between bitter enemies. And that was, of course, money. The journey to the money we use today was really a process of solving one problem after another. Simple barter, it's a real pain. So early commodity money like barley in Mesopotamia was a big improvement, but it was heavy and it could rot. This led people to use precious metals like silver, which were way more durable but had their own issues, which ultimately led to the genius invention of the coin. Just look at this comparison for a second. Barley had real, actual value. You could eat it to survive. But silver? You can't eat silver, and it's way too soft to make good tools. Its value is purely cultural, an imagined value that we all just agree on. This shift from something with inherent value to something with purely symbolic value was a massive cognitive leap for our species. And this is where a brilliant innovation just changed everything. Before coins, you had to weigh your silver for every single transaction, and you always had to worry if it was pure. Then King Alyattes comes along and solves this by stamping a piece of metal with his seal. That mark was his royal guarantee of its weight and its purity. Suddenly, you no longer had to trust the merchant in front of you, you just had to trust the king. And that's what money really is. It isn't the metal or the paper. It is the single most successful system of mutual trust ever invented by humans. It's more open-minded than language, more tolerant than state laws, or even religion. It allows total strangers who might absolutely despise each other's gods to cooperate peacefully and effectively. This quote from Harari just perfectly captures the psychological genius of it all. See, I don't actually need to believe in the value of a dollar bill myself. I just need to believe that you believe in it, and that the person next to you believes in it, and boom, the whole system works. It's a network of shared imagination that circles the entire globe. Okay, so we have societies organized by laws. We have economies connected by money. What was the next great unifier? Well, it was politics. The grand, ambitious project of uniting vast numbers of people under a single rule, the empire. Now, an empire isn't just a really big country. Its key feature is that it rules over many different peoples, each with their own separate cultures and identities. And empires have this unique vision, an almost unlimited appetite to expand, and, ultimately, to bring the entire world under one political umbrella, usually for what they claimed was everyone's own good. Empires have a really complicated and often brutal legacy. On one hand, they brought war, enslavement, and destruction. But on the other, they left behind shared culture, technology, and ideas that still shape our world. I mean, look at these two iconic landmarks in India. Both were built by imperial rulers, and today they are integral parts of India's national and cultural heritage. And this really gets to the core paradox of empire. They were incredibly powerful engines of unification, melting down countless local cultures into new, larger civilizations. But this process was almost always violent and deeply traumatic. So, for better or for worse, pretty much every culture on Earth today is a product of this imperial legacy. So, what kicked this whole thing off? What was the spark that lit the fuse of the modern world? You'd probably guess it was some huge discovery, right? Or maybe a brilliant new invention. But according to Harari, it was actually the total opposite. The revolution began when we, as a species, finally have the guts to admit we didn't have a clue. Just take a look at this map. See all those blank spots? Before this period, maps were always filled in. They pretended to know everything, even if they had to make stuff up. This map, this is a game changer. Why? Because it's one of the first to have the honesty to say, hey, there are parts of the world we just don't know about yet. And that one simple admission that we are ignorant, that was the real big bang for modern science. You see, the scientific revolution, it wasn't a revolution of knowledge. It was a revolution of ignorance. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about finally being okay with asking the questions. And the discovery of America, man, that was the ultimate proof. Suddenly, bam, there's a whole continent that none of the ancient texts, none of the holy books ever mentioned. It proved once and for all that the only way to really learn was to get out there and see the world for ourselves. Okay, so this new hunger for knowledge was super powerful, but it wasn't working in a vacuum. It teamed up with two other massive forces, and together they created this incredible feedback loop, an engine of progress that honestly would change the planet forever. So let's break this engine down. You've got three main parts. First, you have science. It's cranking out new knowledge, new tech, everything from better maps to deadlier cannons. Then you have empire. Governments use that new tech to go out and conquer new territories. And those new territories, they become giant open-air laboratories for the scientists, full of new plants, new animals, new data. And the third piece, the fuel for the whole thing, capitalism. Investors started pouring money into these expeditions, betting that all this science and conquest would lead to huge profits down the road. Science, empire, and capital, they became the ultimate power trio. Want a perfect example of this engine in action? Let's talk about Captain James Cook. In 1768, he set sail for Tahiti. And the official mission, the one everyone talked about, was purely scientific. He was going to observe the transit of Venus across the sun. Sounds pretty noble, right? A simple quest for knowledge. But here's the catch. Cook wasn't just a scientist. He was an officer in the British Royal Navy. And all that scientific data he was collecting, detailed maps of coastlines, notes on resources, understanding local politics, that wasn't just for academic papers. It was pure gold for the British Empire. Science was basically the R&D department for imperial conquest. And we have to be brutally honest about the cost of this so-called progress. For the people who already lived in these places, in Australia, in Tasmania, this engine wasn't bringing progress. It brought disease, it brought violence, it brought the theft of their land. And in the case of the native Tasmanians, it led to their complete annihilation within a century. It's a really chilling reminder, isn't it, that one person's golden age of discovery can be another's apocalypse. So this engine of science, empire, and capital, well, it was just getting warmed up. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and it was like strapping a rocket booster to the whole thing. It went into absolute overdrive, and it didn't just change our world, it changed our idea of time itself, our very sense of what it means to be a person. The biggest invention of the Industrial Revolution might not have been the steam engine. It might have been the timetable. Think about it. For all of human history, life was tied to the rhythms of nature, sunrise, sunset, the seasons. But with the factory, for the first time ever, life became dictated by the clock. The whistle blew, the assembly line started, and everyone had to be in sync. We started marching to the beat of the machine. And that rhythm, it never left us. It followed us out of the factory and into every part of our lives. The alarm clock that jolts you awake, your 9-to-5 schedule, the constant pings and notifications from your phone, all of it. It's all just a modern echo of that factory whistle. We're still living on industrial time. And the sheer scale of our impact, it's staggering. I mean, look at this.
If you could somehow put all the large animals on Earth on a giant scale, on one side you'd have humans and our farm animals, cows, pigs, chickens. On the other, every wild mammal left, all the elephants, the tigers, the bears, all of them. Well, our side would outweigh the wild animals' side by a massive margin. It's not even close. We haven't just conquered the planet. We've literally transformed it into a giant factory farm for ourselves.
Which brings us right back to that question from the start. We have all this power. We have material wealth that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. But has it made us content? Has it given our lives more meaning? Are we any happier? To even start to unpack that, we have to remember the core idea from the very beginning of Sapiens. Our world runs on stories. Things we take for granted, like companies or nations or even money, they don't actually exist in the physical world. They're what Harari calls legal fictions. They're shared myths that we all just agree to believe in. And these stories are maybe the most powerful force on the planet. And right now, today, the most powerful story we all believe in is the myth of progress. It's this deep-seated belief that every new technology, every bit of economic growth is automatically making the world a better place. That's the story that fuels our entire global system. It's the promise that makes all the hard work, all the stress, all the sacrifice seem worth it. And look, in many ways, the story of progress came through on its promises. For the first time in history, more people die from eating too much than from eating too little. We've largely tamed famine and plague. But at the same time, while our material conditions have skyrocketed, things like loneliness and anxiety are on the rise. It's like we figured out how to fill our bellies, but we're left with this nagging feeling of spiritual emptiness. And that leads us to Harari's final, pretty chilling thought. Here we are, Homo sapiens, with the powers of gods. Literally, we can create and destroy on a planetary scale. We can re-engineer life itself. And yet, we're still the same anxious, dissatisfied apes we've always been. He leaves us with this question. Is there anything more dangerous than dissatisfied gods who don't know what they want? After this whole incredible journey, we've become all-powerful, but we still have no idea what to do with it. A look into Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind gives you the insight, but the full book gives you the breakthrough. If you're ready to master your own mind, the link is in the description. Share this with someone who is also building their best self. Then like and subscribe to keep gaining clarity. Choose to grow.